I thought we were the only survivors.
Chief, we got a problem.
Lower your weapons. It's me, Larenthyr of the Wild, Vigil Warmaster. I led you at Cursed Shore.
Why are we delaying? They're bound to turn.
We don't mean you any harm.
That'd be a nice change, considering all of your kind started going nuts. Enemy in the air! What are you doing? Don't take off, you idiot! No! Damn it!
Find cover! We have a new predator in our midst! Don't assault them head on! We don't have the weapons to repel them!
I do. Cover my people. Maybe we can turn this disaster around.
Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my impressions and experiences in the first Heart of Thorns beta, which ran yesterday over 3 blocks, each about 2 hours long. We got to play the Revenant if we wanted, or any of the other classes, but no elite specialization stuff in this beta, and we got to experience what I would say is about a third of the map Verdant Brink, which is the first map we'll be exploring in the expansion. Remember, they have stated, though, that these new maps will have 3 biomes. There's going to be one kind of middle normal area, which is where we were exploring in this beta. Then there's going to be a biome deep down in the crevices in the dark, which we could not explore in this beta. And there's a biome high up in the trees in the canopy, which, again, we couldn't explore. I'll open up by just saying we can only play as humans as well in this beta. I believe this is largely due to the fact that they have a lot of voice acting to do for Heart of Thorns. As you are probably already aware, our main characters actually speak now, and they speak a lot. This is as impressive as ever, really drags you into the story far more than Guild Wars 2's managed to before.
Bloodstains, but no bodies. Not a good sign.
But obviously, because every different race is going to need different voice acting, I think that's why we're just stuck with humans. I will talk initially as well a little bit about the Revenant. Now, the way they had this structured was you had to make a new character on a specific beta character slot that appeared on our accounts. And when the beta wasn't running, you couldn't be on this character. While you were on this character, certain things were locked out. So there was no World vs. World, for example. There was no TPVP. There was no guild panel. There was no way to, like, interact with the rest of Guild Wars 2. Though you were still on your main client. You still had the same amount of gold you usually would have had. You still had the same achievements and so forth, though there were no achievements to earn in there, and neither were there any vendors either or ways to access the trading post. So even though this was our main account, really it was pretty separate. There was a weird bug thing you could do by deleting a Revenant and then like unlocking skins or something to actually get these skins on your other heavy classes on your regular account, but otherwise there's really no interaction there whatsoever. I did play Revenant for all 6 hours we had available, or that I was actually in there for the beta, and I've got to say it really grew on me the more I played it. This wasn't like when I played at Brighton and there was a whole lot of other stuff going on and it felt much more constrained. Now I was at home, I was relaxed, I was able to focus and play with my regular key bindings and my regular graphics setup, and everything felt nice. So it was easier to really sit down and focus on the way that the class worked and learn it. And by the end of the beta, yeah, I felt like specifically the mace-axe combo was a hell of a lot of fun. Now the problem is, because we just loaded into this character beta slot, it started at level 80, but the gear was exotic quality celestial stuff, and it was in a really tanky rune set too, Dolyak runes. Do ArenaNet know, by the way, that the tier 6 on Dolyak runes are absolute trash? So, basically, we really didn't do very much damage. Now, I understand why they'd put us on a Celestial. It's so that people can, in theory, run the Condi builds, or they can run the defensive builds, or the supporty builds, or whatever, and it's going to somewhat work. So, I agree with that perspective. But ultimately, it means because we're on Celestial and such terrible runes, we were doing low damage. It was the impression of a lot of people playing the beta, and not just mine, that basically if you ran into the tanky traits, and especially if you ran Hammer main hand, it was almost impossible to kill some mobs. They actually had to do a patch in the middle of the beta, rebalancing things so that you could actually kill stuff in the Silver Waste. Yeah, it was that bad. Oh, and for what it's worth, before the beta started officially, there was like a 15-minute period where it had a full start and it was accidentally up, so that was pretty interesting. So, because of the whole gear thing, I decided to run kind of more Condi style stuff, and I specifically went with Mace, Axe, and when I got used to the rotations, when I learned how to like get the double blast from the Mace to 2, which drops a fire field, and then the Mace 3, which drops a cascading blasting. When I managed to start getting lots of might rolling, it felt quite fun. And you'll see in the footage too that towards the end of the beta, which I'll be using in quite a few videos coming up, I actually start to get a little bit better at using my various legends and the Revenant himself. Of course, we only have a very small slice of the Revenant. We've only seen 3 of his trait lines out of the 6 he will have in the end, including the elite specialization, and we've only seen 2 of his legends out of a potential 5 also. So there is gonna be a lot more to see of the Revenant. It's kind of hard to judge, especially with the gear set thing. Someone actually made the quite apt comparison, I'd say, so this is like playing an Ellie or experiencing an Ellie, but you only get 2 attunements to experience, you know, and it really does feel that way with the Revenant. Again, there was this racial skill thing. Somebody mentioned to me that I was expecting this. This was exactly the same last time I played Heart of Thorns. If you were a Revenant, you had no racial skills. If you were other classes, then you did have the human racial skills. So again, this seems kind of weird. Why would Revenants not be allowed them? Are they cutting them? I'm not going to bang on about that topic too much, though. Alright, so let's talk about the structure of the beta itself. When you first loaded in, you loaded into the Silver Wastes, but kind of like a special personal story instance of the Silver Wastes, where you are informed, hey, the Pact fleet has been destroyed, you need to go help them. There is a doorway near the southwestern Silver Wastes that forever has been blocked off. Well, that is now open, and this is a direct way for us to walk, after we've defended some people in the Silver Wastes, to walk straight into Verdant Brink. This keeps us in personal story. Now, this is pretty interesting, because never before in Guild Wars 2 have you been in a personal story instance, gone through a loading screen, and stayed in a personal story instance on the other side. That would be quite interesting if Heart of Thorns starts pulling that off, but this could have just been a beta thing for us. But we start this personal story instance, and it's an expanded version of what we originally saw a couple of months back when they did the press event.
I was expecting carnage, but this... Mordremoth actually took down the entire fleet.
Spirits. Would anyone have survived? We need to get down there, fast!
So, Bram freaks out because Aya's missing and could possibly be dead because of what happened to the Pact fleet. You run down, you meet some disgruntled members of the Pact who have a dilemma on their hands. Some Sylvari have fled, been taken away, captured by Mordremoth, and one of the Sylvari people there is saying, hey, we should go save them, while pretty much everyone else is saying, no, the Sylvari could be turning, this guy could be leading us into a trap, we should stay and fortify the area to survive. We get the decision, who do we want to help, but once again, just like before, only one of these was actually available in the beta, and that was to go help the Sylvari. So we go off and end up killing some Mordrim. We learn the same dialogue we had before about how Mordremoth takes people alive for some reason, how he could be converting them, bringing them into his armies. We destroy the champion, we return, and then we get this little expanded bit where we get kind of a special new cutscene. So Ritlock is here already, quite early on in the story, which I think is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to see him appear somewhere much deeper out in the jungle. But he says, yes, he's just returned to Tyria. He's fine, except all he's managed to find are scared and frightened and disorganized members of the Pact. And he's happy to see us because we're the commander. Now, his actual reveal does come to us in the form of a cutscene that's unlike anything we've seen in personal story. So the original launch of the game had very arty style cutscenes, like when you join the Diamond Priory or any of the orders, like the end at Ara story mode, like the beginning of AC, or even the one when you very first create your character. Had those kinds of cutscenes. It had in-engine cutscenes where really all they're doing is just moving the camera around away from your body, and then it had the side-by-side ones. Well, we got something new here. This actually looked and reminded me a lot of what they did back during Season 1 of The Living World, when Scarlet attacked Lion's Arch with the Breachmaker, and we got that kind of cutscene when we first logged in. Where it was like something ArenaNet had shot for themselves in-engine, but they had really controlled the camera a lot and done some kind of elaborate, cool animations. It was good. I liked it. The only problem is these things are quite clearly low resolution. It's like they've been shot in 720p or something and then upscaled onto our monitors when we're playing on 1080, which just adds this grime to the screen during them. If they can fix that, I think that's actually something really cool and improved that moment when Ritlock appeared to us. After he's returned, we do actually have to defend now the area. We have to wait for nightfall to end, I believe is the setup. There's tons of mobs running in. Personal story is still the same in that you cannot fail it, so this is a huge negative for me. I think personal story sucks if you can't fail it. So I was trying very hard, accidentally threw myself off a cliff a couple of times, and oh, it doesn't matter, I'll just instantly respawn. But fine, ArenaNet have decided that's the way they want this game to be. Interesting enough, a boss does spawn, who is a cavalier. We've heard about these already. We've heard about some of the Hylek riding on beetles, basically mounted enemies. Well, we see that straight away here. We see a Mordrum guy riding on a dinosaur. It is frigging awesome. And when you get him to a low enough health threshold, he actually dismounts from the dinosaur, and his mount runs off, which you can go off and kill. I actually thought that would be pretty cool if that was an achievement or something to go kill him, like an optional thing. But then you actually get to fight the guy once you've managed to dismount him. There's a lot of mounted enemies. They all look phenomenal. We do get to see some Hylek riding around on beetles later, and this is just kind of our first taste of it. And then the instance itself concludes. It does something pretty cool, though. First, we get a bit of a conversation between Destiny's Edge and Ritlock.
Finally, someone I can count on. Welcome to the party, Commander. I'm a little late myself. I've been searching for Destiny's Edge, but all I've found are panicky packed soldiers.
Tribute. It's damn good to see you alive. Where have you been? What's that new magic you're using?
Later, Cup. All you need to know is that I'm back, and I'm better than ever.
It was kind of clunky. You guys will see in the footage here, Rox and Ritlock aren't even facing each other. They were nowhere near each other. These little things can be really frustrating for making the personal story feel fun to play. I hope they do iron these little issues out, because they're going to prop up a lot in the personal story, and I think that's going to suck for Heart of Thorns. But once that's over, they do something pretty interesting with Lorantha of the Wild. We get our reward, and we actually get the option to leave straight away. But if you stick about, you can speak to some NPCs. They've kind of got this new system in place as well, where you can speak to other NPCs in the area to get more information, but it doesn't actually progress the story. And there's a new icon for that. It's a little green starburst on kind of like a white page. So it's like, hey, you can speak to these guys for extra information. I really appreciated that. But you can listen to Lorantha, and Lorantha will actually say to you, hey, I'm gonna hang around in this area, you should come see me. And this really highlights the setup ArenaNet have talked to us about before, where they're saying, look, you will meet characters in the personal story, like here we met Lorantha, and then once that personal story step is over, they're gonna say to you, hey, I'm staying in this area, and then they will be featured in the events of that area, the outposts, many of them meta events, and we will then get tons more dialogue. So it's this really cool system where you meet an NPC, getting to know them a little, and then they say, hey, find me out in the real world, and then there they are, and their story continues. And I really like this. For some reason that tweaked me in just the right way. It's like other RPGs where you meet a character in the main story and then they give you a bunch of side quests, say. It kind of felt a lot like that, and there was this whole little section of dialogue there that Lorantha was giving us as this segue into the outpost system. Reward-wise, we got a mastery point from that, which allowed us to start playing around with those, which we'll talk about in a second. There was also some extra rewards like champ bags. Funnily enough, if you got lucky enough in champ bags, you could get like a Zerker axe, and then you could actually have a Zerker axe. I like the idea that there was probably someone out there in this beta who got really lucky and got a couple of rare drops, a couple of exotic drops, and actually managed to Zerk themselves out and start experiencing real damage instead of just celestial. But yeah, that was a possibility. They also had kind of some other trophies, like placeholder items. There were placeholder things in this beta, so there's some reward we'll get for personal story steps that was placeholder. There were some things you could like gather and you get placeholder trophies or enemies you could kill. There were like blue ones, green ones, rare ones I saw being pinged by people, and they were just shown to us as question mark, question mark, question marks. Obviously the devs don't know what they want for those rewards just yet. So that's what we did there, and we got our mastery point. So let's talk a little bit about this. It was quite tempting for me to just go through and read all of the masteries for you guys verbatim, just like I kind of wanted to a couple of months back. I'm not going to do that. If you want to see them, they have all been listed on the wiki. major changes, though, are the UI is very different now. Back when I played it a couple of months ago, they had this really cool thing where if you click the experience bar at the bottom of the screen, it kind of lifted up this whole thing, this big UI panel, and it was really cool. I guess they've decided they don't want that, though. You also remember recently I was speculating with you guys about some new icons we saw on the hero panel. Well, it turns out one of those definitely is masteries. Underneath achievements is now the masteries icon. We can click this and we get a bunch of our tracks. No new tracks have been added. Descriptions may have slightly changed, but the same general stuff's there. So you've got Itzel lore, Nuok lore, Exalted lore, Mushroom Mastery, if that's what it's called, hang gliding for the Heart of the Maguma so far, and then the only ones we've seen for Tyria are precursor crafting and fractal stuff. And the fractal stuff is still like all obscured by the mist, and we don't quite know what they're doing with fractals just yet. Now, in addition to that, there have been some other changes. Now, like gliding, for example, they've taken a lot of feedback that they already had, and it feels a lot better than it used to. Now, I played the gliding before, and it really wasn't that good. You have to jump off, and then you had to wait for a pop-up to appear, and then you had to press space to deploy your glider. Well, now, it kind of functions a lot better. The masteries themselves have changed. You get, like, infinite endurance when you manage to max out gliding, which is really cool. But also, now, if you just hold space, you will instantly get the glider out as quickly as possible. Now, gliding never gives you height, so gliding will not allow you to make jumps you couldn't before in terms of like that were higher up than you. Your character's gonna kind of jump, hit the peak of its arc, and then drop the peak of its arc ever so slightly. Then, as long as you're holding the spacebar, it will get the glider out. So it's really fun. It doesn't feel very clunky at all. I still think turning on a dime on the glider is really stupid. Like, you can turn way too easily. There's even a perk that's like, oh, you can hover in place while you're gliding if you want, and it's like, well, I can simulate that now anyway by just turning the camera quickly and going in little descending circles. So there's still some stuff I don't like about it, but it feels way better than it did before. And I think the fact that there's not been many comments about how clunky it is or whatever on the forums or on Reddit kind of shows that actually they've started to nail how the glider should work. Really, the gliding is super fun. It's one of these stupid things, I always take it with a grain of salt. The devs were always saying to us, hey, when you're gliding, it totally changes the game, and you're running around the maps, and you're constantly thinking, hey, where can I glide to? You know, those just sound like stupid comments people come out with, but it's true! Like, as I was playing on the map, every time I got anywhere remotely high, I was then looking around my area. I was like, oh, I could glide places. All right, I'm high up, I could glide. Like, you're always thinking of it, and then it feels so intuitive and natural to just jump and hold space, and all these little, you'll just see me gliding constantly wherever I can. It's fun, guys, and it's fun even with just one mastery point dropped in there. Actually, in the middle of the second beta, I'm skipping ahead a bit here, but in the middle of the second beta, I went to the Itzel village, which was featured to the north of the original areas we saw, and in this place, but when I originally went there, I never had the glider, I never had any masteries, I never had the mushroom jumping either, which was the second thing I unlocked. And so to walk around this village in the treetops was really cool. I was confined to their pathways, and there was a lot of places I could see that I could go to, but they were like out of reach, and constantly I'd get to areas and like platforms, I'd be like, man, if I could just glide, I could travel across there. So it was a completely different perspective. It was very restrained and very kind of intimate perspective first time I explored the village, because I was using all of their walkways, and I was walking past the NPCs, and I was taking things very slow. And then when I returned there the next time, I had so much more freedom. It was a completely different experience traveling around that treehouse. And actually, I feel a bit sad that it's so easy to start gliding, because now I know the game feels so different when you can glide versus when you can't, that I'm going to kind of miss, if I go for gliding straight away, as many players will, I'm actually going to miss kind of that intimate experience of traveling around future Itzel villages, or whatever else happens to wait for us in the jungle. So this is another thing where I would prefer a more restrictive system, so it was like, hey, maybe you can only start gliding once you finish the mushroom stuff or whatever, but I know this community, and I know people wouldn't like that idea at all. So, yeah, that was pretty interesting. Getting the mushrooms too, again, added this whole other level of exploring that village. You could get much higher, you could find all these places, kind of like the mushroom mastery allows you to get a lot of height, and the glider allows you to go a lot of distance with that height. It's kind of how I ended up feeling. Masteries felt fun. Those were the only two I got, and I didn't play around too much with the other stuff. However, on the topic of masteries, of course, this now means, once again, we care about experience. and oh boy, this felt good. Once again, I was actually caring about finishing events or killing enemies to get bonus experience. Like, there's this whole facet of the game with experience that just I have not cared about for so long, and once again, that was really there, big time. And actually, I noticed some differences to dynamic events too. I've actually always thought one problem with Guild Wars 2 was how they've failed to realize truly the bronze, silver, gold reward structure of events. They kind of came out before launch and they were like, yeah, look, you know, people who just help out a little with events, they'll get bronze. If you've been helping out a reasonable amount, you'll get silver. But if you've really tried really hard, if you've done a lot, you'll get the gold reward. I always liked the idea of the gold reward being something rare and something you're like, oh man, yeah, sweet, I got gold, you know, and that's a cool little happy moment for you. But Guild Wars 2's never been that. It's just been, oh, you get gold for like tagging something for half a second. The only time you ever see bronze is if you're on a Condi build doing a world boss and you got there right at the end, and maybe you'll see a silver. Like, that was stupid to me, and I feel like bronze, silver, and gold basically doesn't exist in Guild Wars 2. Bronze and silver are just things for you to be ever so slightly disappointed about that you never managed to get gold every now and then. And the event rewards themselves, when we didn't care about experience, were too kind of crappy. Well, now we care about experience again, and I noticed, I don't know whether this is something specific they're doing, but I noticed I was getting an awful lot of bronzes. Is this just because I'm in Celestial gear and a lot of events were scaled up massively because we had huge zergs? Or are the devs actually finally looking back at this and saying, alright, maybe bronze should be the default, and then if you do really well, you get silver. If you do even better than that, you get gold. I think I would prefer that, especially with masteries, because then I'm really going to be very happy when I do get the gold reward, and it counts for that bonus experience, which I desperately want for my masteries. That remains to be seen. The rate of progression that you're getting masteries at felt pretty solid to me too, but again, that's just this section of this map. I don't know how out of whack that's going to get thrown with stuff like instant level up tomes. Am I just going to max out all my masteries because I have over a stack of them waiting in my bank that weren't hard to get in the first place? What about dungeons? Are they just going to trivialize it? Please, ArenaNet, be careful with this. Keep this sacred. I want to be caring about experience again for a long time. I don't want to play the game for a month and then have all my masteries done. That's gonna suck. And please, don't give in to QQ about people saying grind is coming to the game. I want systems that keep me engaged for reasonable amounts of playtime, not just flood to the game, finish everything, and then complain that there's no content. So, a couple of other little notes, because this was the regular client, in case any of you were wondering, I was wondering this, conditions and all those things, there were no specializations available for us, like, that system was not there, this is just Guild Wars 2, okay? So, like, for example, the Revenant, we could, if we wanted, pick 3 minors, and by trading into lines, we were getting passive stats. Now, these will not exist when the Revenant actually comes to us, it's just kind of because this is still regular Guild Wars 2, and that also means stuff like conditions are still capping normally, and again, that's going to throw balance and change things too. So I just wanted to clarify that for you guys. I do want to take a break from the stuff we're currently talking about, though, to talk about probably my favorite moment of the entire beta, and that was involving the outpost system. Now, outposts I don't feel like I understand completely. Like, I tried to hang around outposts a lot to get a feel for dialogue popping, to get a feel for events coming around the area, but really, all it was defend events coming up every now and then that felt completely unrewarding to stick about and do. And there was an icon on the map, which was pretty cool, but whenever I hovered over it, it said, this is ready to be activated, and I could never activate it. It then got further complicated when night fell, and then the outpost became a rally point too, and had a little supply thing, and I could run supply to it, but that didn't seem to do anything. This just didn't feel too great. But when Laranthir of the Wild was around the original outpost, and a whole ton of the events were rolling, and I was close enough to him to hear his dialogue, my god, it felt pretty good. There was one specific moment where, as all chaos was unleashing, as Morgemoth was pushing hell upon these people, these members of the Pact, they got into a fight among one another. They got into a fight saying, why should we trust the Sylvari? We need help, but why should we trust you? There was a real argument. There was even a comment from Laranthir saying, what are you talking about? Don't you remember me? I led you at Cursed Shore, which was a great callback to, of course, events of the original game. And just as they're saying this, hell erupts, and Morgemoth's vines shoot out in the area. It was my favorite moment of the entire beta, and this is the kind of thing I really want to see of the open world. Like, that was a cool story moment going on there, right there, and it was happening kind of live, and I really did freak out when all these things exploded out, and that's kind of hard to make me do. Problem is, though, I felt like it was still kind of difficult to follow dynamic event stories. I don't know whether it's because my dialogue volume was too low for a while, but it was very easy to lose track of where Laranthir was, or when I was hanging around a lot with the Itzel, when they were doing their events, yes, I caught a fair amount of it, a good, 70%, but I hate knowing that there's a lot of dialogue going on and you're missing it because you're fighting an enemy and you're just slightly out of earshot. I really want ArenaNet to address this in some way, increase the range at which we can hear these characters speaking from, just so that people can really stay involved, because when I was involved, it was really, really awesome, but I'll bet that there's a lot of players who never saw that dialogue whatsoever. Speaking of the Itzel meta event, this was what I did specifically. I did the meta event around the initial outpost a couple of months back when I played. This ended with a big fight up in the canopy where we fought the Wyvern. Now, back then though, all the players started with gliders. We don't all start with gliders now, and I think gliders are a pretty essential part of that Wyvern fight up there, and so we couldn't actually participate in this, as far as I know, on this beta. However, there was a giant Wyvern fight on a rocky plateau at the end of the Itzel meta event. So this meta event involved, first of all, the outpost itself has some hunters that are running out, and you're supposed to defend them while they go on their hunt, but because, again, everyone's in Celestial gear, everyone's playing a class they don't understand, and because they're scaling stuff up massively, these hunters were dying constantly. I tried that event a lot of times and I failed every single time, so I don't know how that looks when it completes. And this actually also meant that I never got to see one of the new adventures, which was only active when the Hylek at the Itzel village were actually kind of happy and content. So I never managed to do that. I would say on that topic though, I like the idea of having actually squishy NPCs like this that actually need to be supported. Hey, if we ever want supporty builds to feel fun, isn't it a good idea to have NPCs that need that support? And during the nighttime, all these other allies that I had to escort all around, they often would die too, and those events would fail too. So it could also be that ArenaNet actually tuning things slightly, so NPCs are weak and there's a reason to maybe go give it protection or heal it, or, give it resistance or whatever we're going to be able to do going forward. So that was pretty interesting, but it did continuously fail. The meta event itself involves a bunch of regular Hylek calling down a Wyvern or a bunch of Wyverns to burn the town, and you can help put out the fires. They're using their new mechanics, their new engine abilities, where they can drop AoEs now that expand over time, and they can actually shrink now too. So at launch, whenever you found a place that was on fire, you'd pretty much grab a bucket, right, and you'd press skill 1 and then you'd put out the fire, and that was it. Well, this was more dynamic than that. Now you actually pick up the water bucket and you actually throw it like ground targeted, and if it hits the fire, it doesn't just put the fire out instantly, it shrinks the fire, because AoEs can now be bigger or smaller, and you want to keep shrinking the fire until eventually it actually does go out. This, meanwhile, there's a bunch of Wyverns painting the floor with, searing flames and heating things up, so it was actually pretty cool, and it was nice to see the Wyverns in action there. Don't forget there's a mastery that allows us to drag Wyverns from the sky, and I don't know how that would work in events like this. But once we do that, we basically follow a bunch of New Hawk. There's a couple of New Hawk visitors in the Itzel village. There's an event with kind of a big sermon in a temple to Armiali, where we also get to meet a couple of these cool little mushroom enemies that kind of explode and poop rainbows everywhere when they die. There is an event where we are delivering eggs to this New Hawk from, like, really high up these big cliffs. But if you, while carrying one of these eggs, get hit by a griffin or go near, like, a green mushroom, you will blow up and fall to the floor. So they're like, this is like a gather event, but it's really much more involved and has a lot more going on than any of the vanilla events we saw at launch of Guild Wars 2. And most events in this map have had that extra level of depth to them. And with this event in particular too, you can see how it interacts with the mastery system. There's a bunch of mushrooms that allow you to climb very high to get the eggs really quickly if you have that mastery. If you can glide, then instead of having to risk your way walking down avoiding mushrooms, you can simply glide back down and carry your eggs to the NPC in that way, which you'll see me doing plenty of. And again, makes it feel really rewarding to actually have that glider or to have the mushroom jumping ability. The event pushes on to finally the regular Hylek village, where you call down a Wyvern, and just as I started to fight the Wyvern, the mechanics look the same as before, as in he's got a break bar and you want to interrupt him and drag him down when he attempts to fly off. Just as we started fighting him, that was when that beta ended. The last meta event that I participated in included Larantha of the Wild as he pushes through the map, and he actually comes to a giant ruined area, perhaps like some kind of exalted ruin. Lots of areas were sealed off by giant vines from ArenaNet. I think that's just for the beta. It's not like we're going to burn our way through those vines or anything. But there was this really huge excavation site with tons of NPCs like throwing rocks to one another in long lines. Tons of secret stairways and back rooms and bridges. Looked a lot like what we've seen some of the World vs. World Borderlands, and a huge pit in the ground. This was the only adventure I actually played, but this adventure involves you going to the bottom of this giant pit filled with tendrils that were trying to CC you and kill you, and you had to grab as much rubble and scavenge as possible. And like, if you got 10, you got bronze. If you got 20, you got silver, and 30, I guess, was gold. I only managed to get, what, like 15, so I got bronze. I didn't even get my way to silver. So that was the adventure, and here is also the location of a meta event where there's a giant troll on a tower who is attempting to like grow this giant Mordrum vine. And it was fun, but I think it must have bugged because you have to get a bunch of Sylvari snipers in position to be able to snipe the troll, but then he just wasn't dying. Or there's some mechanic with the mortars. I've noticed with these meta events, specifically that one, that we really were encouraged to spread out over a large area. You know, you had people defending the snipers, but then you had people a long way away as well, like sorting out mortars. And to get from one plateau to the other was a hefty, hefty walk. The density of waypoints is just as low in this new map as it has been in Dry Top and the Silver Waste. And that makes, you know, you really be careful about dying, which again is something I'm a huge advocate for. I don't like kind of the res rushy graveyard rush style stuff we see in a lot of open world events in Guild Wars 2 at the moment. All of this was pretty much coupled with many attempts from me to break out of maps, but when your glider hits a wall, you instantly lose it, so it's actually a lot harder to break out even with a glider than you'd expect, and ultimately I was unsuccessful. But that was pretty much it. I had a lot of fun. The final beta, I was a little bit strapped for things to do. I will say that. I feel like maybe we need a little bit more play area. In the end, I just started grinding like events because I was like, oh, I just want to get more masteries, and I think I've seen pretty much everything there is. But I don't think that's really a fault of the map or Heart of Thorns. It's just that the beta was quite small for the amount of time we got to play in it, and I stuck on the same character the entire time. You guys will be seeing this video will have had lots of clips of things I'm talking about. The kind of more raw, unedited footage will be appearing in more of my videos coming out over the next couple of weeks, like Q&As and stuff. So do keep an eye out for that. Let me know what you thought of the beta. Hope to have brought you guys in the loop there, and I guess we'll do some follow-ups on specific things where it's warranted over the next couple of days. Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.